Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 2 of Project Odyssey. In the last episode, you saw me launching a rocket, or at least trying to launch a rocket. We were really just failing with it a bunch of times. Well, it started off where I had just finished that satellite, or at least the beginning of that satellite. I might have made a few more tweaks after that. And I needed to make a second stage, so I was trying to figure out what I wanted that stage to look at. And you're watching me here now. This is me trying to construct different things that I could experiment with and weld together to see whether or not I liked this or like that, or which fuel tank was I going to use, which engine was I going to use, what did I ultimately want it to look like, because this particular piece right here, it's going to become a sub-assembly that is going to be used throughout the entire project. It's going to get used for every single thing that I might want to put in orbit. You know how in real life we have the, let's take for example the Atlas V. It has a Centaur upper stage, and they kind of use that for everything that they do. They have the Centaur on when they're just going into a low orbit or a high orbit, geosynchronous orbit, going interplanetary, sending something to Mars. They use a Centaur for everything, and I want to use my Minotaur for everything as well. And if it's going to be used so much that we're going to see it every episode, I want it to be really cool. So far, what you've been seeing, what I've been doing here, it is I keep on going out and looking at my mod where I have all of the different parts. This is the one right here. This is actually one of the ones that has all the parts in it. It has a lot of KW Rocketry and Lackluster Labs type parts in it, for example. And I have to go to different installations to grab the different parts that I want to experiment with, pull them all into one installation that still isn't actually Project Odyssey, but allows me to look at all those parts in one place, and then construct something, weld it together, take the welded thing back over to Project Odyssey, and then I can actually see what it's going to look like when I attach it to my launcher. And after having done that on a bunch of different parts, I came to the conclusion that I had two different versions of my second stage that I might want to go with, and so I brought them up here together at the same time to take a look at what they were both at the same time here. Neither one of them is actually done or anything like that. It's just I want to get an idea of which one I want to keep on building, and the other one I'm going to scrap. The one on the left has some Lackluster Labs type parts. The one on the right is KW and near future propulsion. So then I pick one of those two and I keep going with that. There were a lot of trips in and out of the vehicle assembly building and out to editing the part file to make that, and then finally I had it ready where we could take it out here onto the launch pad and fire up the engine to see what it was going to look like when it was out there inserting into the orbit whatever it is that it might have up on top there. I noticed that I don't have my hot rockets set up for that engine, so I'll still have to do that, but I'm checking all the other things like the fuel usage and the ISP, the thrust values, whether or not the antenna that I have embedded on the side of it there in the avionics section is working, and so on like that. And after we have that, the next stop is to go back into the vehicle assembly building, putting on a fairing just so it'll go through Ferrum Aerospace properly. Nothing inside, no payload, obviously not enough Delta V to do anything useful. We just want to do a launch test. This is intended to launch itself out over the water and come crashing down into the ocean, but at least we'll get an idea of whether or not it's going to fly straight, and just check on the see down there at the bottom. I have some RCS jets that are being used similar to how some real rockets are set up like that. RCS jets that are helping to maneuver it because it has no gyroscopes on there at all. It's totally relying on the RCS for its maneuvering, as well as maybe any vectoring that happens to be on the engine itself. So now we have it here flying out over the ocean. Like I said, it's been flying great so far, so I'm thinking I like it. Take a look at that. That is pretty cool. There's a little bit of shake in the engine right there, but that is looking pretty cool so far. I think I'm gonna like this one. This is the direction. I brought my kids in, I brought my wife in, and I had them look at all the different versions, and they liked both of them, of course, but they liked this one better. So I think we're gonna stick with this, and boom, there it goes down into the ocean, which means we can now go back into the vehicle assembly building and see what it's like to actually put a little bit of a payload on here this time. Once again, have no intention at all of trying to actually launch this. We still need to weld together a lower stage, a first stage, plus we're wasting a lot of fuel on this thing by trying to use it down in the lower atmosphere, because I have that switch on the engines where down in the lower atmosphere the ISP is just horrible, but up in vacuum we get up close to 400 ISP, so that's really where we're going to be using it. So it's almost ready now. You can see I have got the RCS jets down there on the bottom. I put some lights on it. So now I'm about ready to take it off, making a copy of it that I can put in my sub-assemblies, saving it off as the Minotaur second stage. Checking here to see if it can deploy any payloads on top of it properly, and sure enough, that thing fired off of there like a rocket itself. And then down it goes, another successful test. Now this one was, I noticed during that last launch that I didn't have my MechJeb window set up with all the different things I wanted, and some people have asked me how you do that. So you can see here I have the custom window editor open. When you're in those windows, you see the one that says Flight Computer. In the upper left, there's an E. If you click on that E, it'll bring up the custom window editor, and in there you can find things like here on this miscellaneous tab, it allows you to put in separators, and then you can move things around and have them just the way you want them lined up. And once all of that is done, then we can go back in and do our next test and see what's up for the next one. So here we're just doing an engine test. This was just trying to see whether or not the decoupler would work correctly and the engine would work. Of course, it didn't have enough thrust to weight to actually get off the pad, so it flew sideways and exploded into a million bits, but explosions are good. And then the next test is to see whether or not the engine will decouple correctly by putting it up on a decoupler. Of course, if you don't set your staging right, it's not going to be in the right place. So I did another test, and this one was to put in where we actually drop off the decoupler and fire the engines with a payload inside of it. And now it's time to try out doing this with an actual first stage. But I have to build a first stage. Now what I want to do is, I think it would be cool if all the first stages were orange tanks. But I don't want them just plain old orange. And even though I'm getting a whole bunch of errors while trying to put this together, which sent me on another goose chase, not necessarily wild goose chase, but a goose chase nonetheless, trying to figure out what those errors were, I was able to put together a couple black tanks and an orange tank in between them, weld it together so you can see how I do my part welding there. Once that's done, then there's a copy of it, but I have a problem where the bottom node, well, the top node there, won't attach. And the reason why that node won't attach is you have to reorder the attachment nodes so that the bottommost in the Y direction, going down toward the bottom of the screen, so that the bottommost is in the bottom of the list. See here on this, at the top of the screen, it said node stack top, node stack bottom. The bottom one needs to be the bottom of the list there. So by doing that, that fixes the problem with the attachments, and then you can go back in and grab it and it will connect up. But this leaves us with a new problem. The problem is that the things, when they weld together, they don't always line up exactly right. So I have to go in and I have to edit the parts and make them the right dimensions and shift them around, and finally I get it into the right place. So I'm testing here to see whether or not it lines up correctly, and if it lines up with the engine correctly. Still getting some critical errors there in my debug menu, but we'll eventually get that all sorted out. And then once I like this, and I'm checking the length here too, because I want it to be a certain length. It also will help me to determine what the volume is of the tank. The volume of the tank is going to determine the number of units of fuel in the tank. I've decided to go with a particular amount of fuel per volume, regardless of what the tanks are. And now right here, notice how my rocket's just kind of going crazy. In the last episode, this is what I was showing toward the end of the episode, where you can see my second stage is completely missing. Why is it missing? I'll tell you. Last time I told you as well, it's the radiator. When the radiator is set up to use interstellar, but it doesn't have the right animation, it can shift the whole thing off a kilometer away from your rocket, which throws off the center of mass. Now right here we're launching another test. This time I'm having engine failures. The engine is trying to not overheat, but it's producing too much power, too much heat from the just running normally, and so another thing that I have to try to tweak. Anyway, these two things are going to get all fixed up here soon, run another engine test. I want to go back to the fuel for a second. So on the fuel, the stock tanks seem like they were using about, for 6,400 units of fuel in the orange tank, there's 37 cubic meters. So that gives me about 174 cubic meters, or units of fuel per cubic meter. Also, based on the mass of that thing, it lets me know that every ton is 200 units of anything, as well as the fuel tank itself being a ton for every 1,600 units of anything. And all of that lets me put the numbers together and generate our new first stage. And we're going to be using this one for all of our 1.25 meters, as long as we can fix that problem with the radiator there, because you can see it's happening again. I still hadn't found the problem. This is the one that I actually ended my last episode on, where all of a sudden the thing just goes and explodes, and I'm like, what? Where the hell did my rocket just go? And I'm looking around for it, but nothing. And so began the great Odyssey in itself of trying to find all the problems with the radiators and the engines overheating and powers not being right and all of these different things that happen when you're trying to put together brand new parts and doing all of them together with the installation that has absolutely nothing in it when you start in the first place. It has been a whirlwind flurry of changes constantly, little number tweaks here and there. And last episode, one of the things I had said was that I had a dish that was using 25 energy per second, I think. I may even have to go back and look at it. I'm not sure if that's exactly what I said. And I said I'd get back to why that was. Actually, I think it might have been a mistake. That's going to happen every once in a while as I go through this, doing all of the changes that I'm going to make. I will get back, I swear, to talking a little bit more in detail about all the different parts and everything I'm doing. But first, I'm trying to work my way through deadly re-entry issues, as well as aerodynamic issues. Notice when we decoupled the upper stage, it just started flipping around, and I'm not sure at this point when I was making this, I wasn't sure what I was going to do about that, or if it was some mistake I had made, or something, maybe drag values weren't right, I don't know, but at this point, I was still working just on deadly re-entry. So here I decoupled the upper stage because I wanted to see what would happen as it tried to re-enter, and as it turned out, you can see I have the deadly re-entry debug menu open over there. You get that by holding down the Alt key and then pressing both D and R at the same exact time. You just tap both D and R, bam, and that opens up the debug menu, and then you can enter different values and try to figure out which ones you like. And so I played around with all kinds of things in there. I played with the shockwave exponent, the heat multiplier. I played with the thermal transition, altitude, speeds, the meters per second there, all different things, trying to figure out why. Remember back when I was making the ISS, I was always having those problems with it where deadly reentry was either burning things up too much or it wasn't burning them up enough. So in this episode, I'm on an odyssey myself to try and find the right values, and I'm trying over and over again to burn up different things to see when I like them, what temperatures I like them, where I get good thermals, how slowly or how quickly things burn up. And I'm realizing now that while I'm looking with it in this debug mode that lets me see the shockwave values, I'm noticing that the parts keep on saying that they're shielded when I feel like they shouldn't be shielded. So some sort of ray casting thing that I'm not sure that I have any control over is happening on this. And I think I might just just have to give in and say, you know, sometimes it's not going to burn up exactly the way that I want. So instead, my new idea was, how about if I then at least just create thermals to make it nice and glowy for longer or earlier or something like that. And I tried to go with like a 1 meter per second to have thermal start just to see what that would do. And I changed the value later and I say, well, let me try using 100 or 200 and pick some number in there. And I think I'm still basically trying to figure out exactly which one I want. And then we start trying to experiment with solid boosters. Of course, it would be nice if I have my staging set correctly. Oh dear, okay. Well, okay, staging is set this time. Now we're okay. So what happened on that one was I tried changing the mass values on those launch clamps, and apparently it doesn't like that, and it causes too much tension, which causes things to snap. So I reduce it back down again, and now we try another thing here. We got our launch boosters just to see what that's going to be like and decouple those. Notice we're going through those awesome volumetric clouds again. Another failure on the staging where I had my clamps set lower than the actual engines, but it dropped on the engines, but it was okay. And then all of a sudden things are exploding, and this is because I've been trying to balance all those parts in there. Things like the radiators and solar panels and the little knickknacks, the batteries and the CPUs and different stuff, all the antenna dishes, trying to get them to have really good values so that they will burn up, where there's a nice spread of them and they'll go pop, 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 pop and explode all along the way. So just another launch test here, seeing how it stages and what the different values need to be for all that stuff still. Once again, still working on those solid boosters, but now going at too high of a speed for my current deadly reentry settings, and those dishes are still exploding. And that ends up being because I had put the values too low for where they burn up, and that fairing, even though it's supposed to be a fairing, a shield against the rigors of launch, it turns out that it sometimes wasn't actually acting as a shield. And even though the aerodynamic model was working correctly to make fairing believe that I should fly straight, deadly reentry was believing that there was no fairing, and so everything was catching on fire and burning up inside the fairing. So I have to just give in on that one and change the values so that they're back to more reasonable Kerbal values, allowing them to go through their launch and not actually explode. Increased that thermal start again on deadly reentry one more time. By this point, we're getting really close. We're up to where it's no longer flipping out when it decouples. Things are exploding nicely when they're re-entering. This is where I find out that the shielding works. I mean, look at the engine itself sometimes is showing up as shielded. That makes no sense to me. The engine is the first thing that's taking the damage. So, you know, just give up. I also need some retro boosters, and retro boosters, I want little ones on here. The normal ones, they're much bigger than this. I have applied a scale factor of 0.5 to make them much smaller, and I'm only putting, well, I hadn't done it yet because you can see they're still very strong, but I'm putting only one solid fuel inside them with the lowest thrust I can possibly manage while still having them be at a reasonable burn time, which is probably going to want to be about 2 seconds. And then I experimented with having them on at the beginning of a launch, but all that did was it was creating a lot of heat, and the heat was exploding my engines. So again, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with not the waste heat, I was going to say waste heat, but just the heat in general, the heat production values on these things. But through all of this, we have persevered, and the Kerbals have been able to put together a rocket that they think is ready to launch the first TDRS C-Class #1 geostationary satellite. And ladies and gentlemen, here it is.
Attitude control system, go. Command and control, go. Fuel, go. Monopropellant, go. RCS, go. Lights, go. Communications, go. Solar systems, go. Electrical, go. 3, 2, 1. And we have liftoff of the TDRS C-1 satellite, providing communications from geostationary orbit above Mission Fuel flow is nominal. Attitude is nominal. Minor steering as we pass through max Q. Propulsion remains nominal. Attitude remains nominal. Cryo second stage prep filters activated. MECO in 3 seconds. And we have MECO. The first stage has separated. Second stage engines powering up. The fairing has separated. Attitude and fuel flow remain nominal. Passing through 65 kilometers. Propulsion remains nominal. Minor steering as we set ourselves onto the proper trajectory to go into a geostationary orbit.
Okay, Kerbonauts, so far it's been a pretty standard launch. You can see that I've just pushed my way out there to 2868 kilometers, which is about where you're going to want to go if you want to set up a geostationary satellite directly above mission control. Now, your antenna, it's going to need to be able to reach back down to the surface, which means it needs to be at least the 2868 kilometers that it takes to get back home, but we're even further away than that because we're not in a direct line with mission control yet. If we had gone straight up, we would have been able to get more in line with mission control, but that would have been way more fuel inefficient as we would be fighting gravity a lot more. This way, we're still in line with mission control, even though we're off center, but we're not wasting a lot of fuel. So now here at 2868 kilometers altitude, we are circularizing our orbit to be about 6 hours. Look in that MechJeb window there on the left where it says orbital period. We are more than 6 hours because look at mission control here. See how we're off center? I want to be out here, not way over here. I want to be back this way, which means I need to be going slower. So Kerbin will rotate here a little bit faster than me because it's rotating every 6 hours, but I'm going around this orbit every 6 hours and 5 minutes. So all I have to do is go into a little bit of warp time, and slowly I will watch as mission control ever so slowly just edges closer to my orbit. And when that happens, then I will drop my orbit back down to about exactly 6 hours, and that will match us up, and we will stay directly over mission control the whole time. After that, the only thing I'll need to do is adjust my inclination to be 0 degrees, because I'm going to want to try to get it as close to perfect as I can. And with that, a 6 hour period, a 0 degree inclination directly above mission control, we will be able to hover in place and provide communication in the whole area using this 5 megameter omnidirectional antenna that we have on top. So I am ready to decouple our payload here and get that satellite deployed, but first I don't want to let it go with no battery, because as soon as I let it go, it will be totally dead. And the way that the battery drained is the topmost battery is empty, and that's the one that's on the satellite. So I was trying to put some battery electricity back up there, and I had it accidentally set on the TAC fuel balancer to times 100, which meant too much power transferred up because I also need some down in my Minotaur stage. But once I got that all figured out, I was finally able to get the battery right and decouple and deploy the satellite's solar panels. And there we are. Now, it's time to take that Minotaur stage and put it into what's known as a graveyard orbit. A graveyard orbit, as you can imagine, is where satellites and boosters and things like that go to die. They go into a slightly higher orbit than geostationary here on Earth, for example. They might go, say, 300 kilometers higher altitude than even geostationary, and they just orbit up there basically forever. Notice here how I've boosted myself out just a little bit, and then once we go a bit further along on that orbit, watching my electrical power up there, and to make sure that my Minotaur doesn't run out of power before it gets a chance to bring its orbit up all the way around. But first, using my action group here to activate those infernal robotics, which is the whole reason I haven't switched away from using 0.23 and getting into the new ARM 0.23.5, because infernal robotics at this day doesn't actually work in that, or so I'm told. I haven't tried it out, but I really don't want to go and mess around with that when I've got so many other things that I'm already working on. So I just want to get this satellite kind of pointed here with the solar panels toward the sun, and the satellite kind of imagining that those communications dishes are now pointing down toward Kerbin. Everything is now deployed, getting it pointed in the right way, and then we can switch back over to that Minotaur that you can see in the distance there a few kilometers away. We'll switch over to that and make sure it gets into its proper graveyard orbit. First, it's showing up as debris because it doesn't have any kind of probe body set on it. And I was thinking, oh geez, I should fix that. I should go in and modify my part file so that next time it won't be debris. And then I thought, wait a minute. A Minotaur stage, once I decouple, even though it's still powerable, it really is kind of debris. So I've decided to let it remain debris, because as soon as I get over here and I'm looking at my power in the upper right-hand corner there, as soon as that power gets down lower, I go, well, you know, this is far enough. I can probably activate my Minotaur here to bring up that periapsis over there on the left-hand side there, bring that up a little bit and kind of more circularize this orbit at a proper graveyard altitude, far enough away from our geostationary orbit altitude that it won't have any effect on future launches or anything like that. I find it highly unlikely, just like in the real world where we have a big graveyard orbit and all kinds of things up there. I find it highly unlikely that in any kind of future launch, when I might be sending something to the moon or Minmus or off to Duna finally, that I might actually collide with anything. It's just really super rare. There's so much space there, even launching equatorially all the time like I do. So we get ourselves lined up with this maneuver node that I want to use in order to boost that periapsis a bit, and then activate the engines, boost it up, and we'll be done with this stage forever. It'll just drift out here as debris. And those of you familiar with my last project, Project Gateway, and Bill Kerman and his attitude toward debris, might be thinking, hold on, isn't that going to get Bill all upset? And isn't he going to want us to make some sort of catcher to get the debris? While we set up my communications here to point one dish at the moon and one at Minmus, why don't we go down and actually hear it from Bill himself, whether or not he's going to be upset about the debris.
Congratulations, everyone! Good job, everyone! Our first satellite is up, and Bob, your automated control software is working perfectly. Tidris C1 should be in position soon. We still need to get another one up, and for Bill's sake, an orbital spare. Bill, would you like to explain? Those of you who know me know that my most important requirement used to be that I didn't want orbital debris, but I've learned since then that it's redundancy, and we need to have 2 of everything and backups for everything. That's right, he'll be in charge of logistics, and everybody else needs some jobs too. There's only 8 of us. So Jebediah here, he's going to be our pilot, and he'll command everything. Bob's going to be our executive officer, in charge when I'm not, and he's also going to work on planning. Joseph is going to be in charge of research, and he'll be working on getting us some extra efficient engines and working on rocket designs that will be extra efficient to get us to Duna and back again. Kesla is going to be working in the science department, working on anomaly detection and instrumentation and anomaly study. As you all know, Neil is the only one with any medical background, so he'll take care of medical, but we're not actually going to start any cloning right now while we're stuck on this planet. Valentina is going to be in charge of engineering and rocket construction. Alright everyone, we know our jobs, and we have jobs to do. We will get to Duna in this decade and do the other things because we want to get home. We must get home to save our Kerbin. We'll start with 2 more communication satellites before the end of the week. We can do this. Let's go.
Okay, Kerbinauts, that's going to do it for this time. I have a little bit more to do to finish off this orbit. We need to get it lined up properly, like I said earlier, with the mission control down there. And we have a couple more satellites to launch and other things to take care of as we start this Odyssey to get our Kerbals home. But that's enough for this time, so until next time, we'll catch up with all this then. I will see you later, Kerbinauts.